Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and for this installment of our Beyond Omega Level series, we're going to get somewhat abstract as we turn our attention to one of the most powerful forces in DC Comics, and also one that you guys have been requesting all the time, the Great Evil Beast. Now, the Great Evil Beast first appeared in Swamp Thing number 50 in 1986, which was part of Alan Moore's celebrated and character-defining run on the series. Now, the Great Evil Beast's introduction into the DC universe was the culmination of a storyline known as American Gothic, which began in Swamp Thing number 37, which coincidentally marked the first appearance of John Constantine. And so when Constantine shows up, we find out that he's meeting with a variety of his associates, each of which are describing the inevitable return of some unknown entity, with each of them describing it in a different way. A woman named Judith claims that there's nothing supernatural about the entity, that it's merely a massive extragalactic energy field that was sucked into a black hole 8 billion years ago. A man named Benjamin Cox describes it as Cthulhu, the elder god featured in the work of H.P. Lovecraft, and a nun named Sister Anne Marie describes it as being Satan from Judeo-Christianity. And so they also speak of a group of South Americans that are working to bring about the return of this entity, but not much information is provided about who they are at this point. And so Constantine then travels to Louisiana, where Swamp Thing is being regrown from the destruction of his body by a villain known as Nuke Face. Constantine convinces Swamp Thing to meet him in Rosewood, Illinois, when he's finished growing, and in return, Constantine will reveal to Swamp Thing things about himself that he could never learn on his own. Meanwhile, Judith, Ben, and Sister Anne Marie are all overtaken by some evil force so intense that Judith throws herself out of a window to escape it. Swamp Thing then shows up in Illinois to help Constantine, and it turns out that he needed to eradicate some vampires that had been living underwater in Rosewood, which of course he does. However, Constantine tells him that he made a mistake in leaving witnesses that had seen the vampires alive to tell others about their existence, because there existed a conspiracy that manifested supernatural incidents all across America to increase the belief in supernatural phenomena. But it would be a while before he would actually explain why that was really a problem. But following this encounter with the Rosewood vampires, Swamp Thing would actually accompany Constantine on various missions around the country, each of which bring them in contact with various occult entities, the last of which was a haunted house in San Miguel, California. Now, after completing this mission, which Constantine assured Swamp Thing would be the last one before what he called the big finale, he takes Swamp Thing to the Monitor satellite in space, where he meets many of the DC heroes that are discussing the impending Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, for those of you guys who may not be familiar, Crisis on Infinite Earths, as most of you guys probably know, was a line-wide event in DC that was conceived as a way to streamline DC's continuity. They managed to get Alan Moore to let what was going on in Crisis affect what he was writing in his Vertigo Swamp Thing run, which is surprising because if there's anybody in comics who would just ignore a line-wide publishing initiative, you'd think it'd be Alan Moore. But regardless, Swamp Thing is confronted by Alex Luthor Jr., who was a central figure in Crisis who helped the DC heroes defeat the Anti-Monitor after the Monitor had been killed. But before he did that, he meets Swamp Thing and tells him that he'll be responsible for dealing with the ramifications of the spiritual realm that are brought about by the Crisis on Infinite Earths event. And so it's at this point that Constantine tells Swamp Thing about the Brugeria Cult, a group of warlocks that have been operating in South America for centuries. Now, in addition to revealing disturbing details such as the initiation ritual and the fact that members wear human skin, Constantine informs Swamp Thing that the cult has orchestrated the series of supernatural events that two of them had been responding to in order to increase the belief that people have in the occult, because according to them, belief is power. Their end goal, he explains, is to take advantage of the weakening of the spiritual plane that the Crisis on Infinite Earths event will cause to bring about the return of an entity capable of destroying heaven. Now, to combat this mysterious entity, Swamp Thing travels to the afterlife to enlist the assistance of Deadman, the Phantom Stranger, Etrigan the Demon, and the Spectre. Now, we end up seeing a conversation between Cain and Abel, which seems a little bit out of place, where Cain describes the Great Evil Beast as the terrible primordial shadow that slept in chaos beyond hell and the soul of darkness itself, and the complete absence of divine light, which gives us a sense of the immense scope of who we're dealing with here. But as the Great Evil Beast draws near, Etrigan amasses an army of demons who form an uneasy alliance with an army of angels being recruited by the Phantom Stranger, and the heroes are also joined by Dr. Fate, whose vast mystical powers have clued him in to the coming of this incredible evil entity. And so as the battle commences, Etrigan is absorbed by the Great Darkness, who demands of Etrigan a simple question: who am I? Etrigan responds responds by telling, "Your name is evil," and that he's the absence of light, his shadow partner locked in an endless fight. The beast tells Etrigan that this has taught him fatalism and inevitability, but explains that it's not the knowledge that he needs and spits Etrigan out. The darkness then absorbs Dr. Fate and asks him what evil is. Fate replies that evil is a quagmire of ignorance that tries to halt man's climb towards God's light and tells him evil is vile and wretched. From this, the beast learns that he and God cannot respect each other and learns the concept of contempt before spitting Dr. Fate out. Now, as the beast begins slaughtering the angelic army that had been assembled, the Spectre shows up and enters the darkness. The Spectre then teaches the darkness that the purpose of evil is to be avenged so that others can see the negative consequences of committing evil and turn away from it. From this conversation, the beast learns the concept of revenge for the eons of torture that it's endured and then spits out Spectre, which is an incredibly impressive feat in and of itself, right? As the Spectre is literally the embodiment of God's wrath and one of DC's strongest characters. Now, just as it seems the great evil beast will succeed in destroying heaven, Swamp Thing approaches it and enters its presence. The beast asks Swamp Thing what the purpose of evil is, and Swamp Thing recalls a conversation that he had with the Parliament of Trees, which led him to believe that just as life needs decay to exist, evil is necessary for good to exist. At this, Swamp Thing is allowed to leave unharmed, and the beast reaches towards heaven, where it's met by the outstretched hand of God, or the presence, or whatever you want to call the supreme deity in DC Comics. But the two hands clasp together and then simply disappear. But Constantine assures those gathered that this was not a victory. It was simply just a draw. Now, something that I want to point out here is that in the Lucifer series this year, Dan Watters basically threw out the idea that Lucifer was in fact the great evil beast, right? And the only way we really know that is because there's a point where you see all these different versions of Lucifer, right? And one of them is a great big huge hand, which is basically the hand of the great evil beast. And when he was asked on Twitter if that was the case, if Lucifer is basically the great evil beast, the response to Dan Watters is yes. The problem with this is that it's largely contested, right? Like a lot of fans out there are like, no, Lucifer is not the great evil beast. It's a wholly different entity. It depends on who you're talking to, right? So some people consider that to be the actual thing, that it really is Lucifer. Others say no. But regardless of how you slice it, not much more is known about the great evil beast. What we do know is that it's the embodiment of evil and darkness in the DC universe, which lends credence to the idea that it's an aspect of Lucifer, and that he's vastly more powerful than Etrigan, Dr. Fate, who's the most powerful wielder of magic in DC, and even the Spectre, who he defeated with ease. In fact, the Spectre would later be punished by the Presence for failing to stop the beast and heaven from merging. Furthermore, the combined forces of some of DC's most powerful characters were unable to mount any resistance whatsoever against the great evil beast, and its destruction was only stopped when it became locked in an eternal union with the Presence, suggesting that the two of them are equal in terms of power, again pointing to the idea that the great evil beast is basically Lucifer. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to know about the great evil beast, right? It's a concept that hasn't really been revisited very often after its initial appearance, probably because it's simply just too powerful to be defeated in any believable way, and to bring it back would probably mean the destruction of the DC universe. But let me know what you guys think, right? Do you find this character interesting? I'm kind of curious. Let me know down in the comments. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.